Welcome, 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 everybody. Hey, thanks for joining us. Tonight we're on our 11th Portrait of a Nevada Learner Pedagogy series, and tonight we're going to be talking about the 5E model. So let me introduce myself. My name is Kim Loomis. I've been with you for God, this is our 11th time together. I'm the former director for online and blended learning. I also taught in the math classroom for over 10 years at the high school level before becoming a project facilitator and working with RPDP and doing some professional development for the State Department of Education before I went into school administration and then eventually into CPD. I was a high school form manager, and also my last 7 years finished up as the director. I have written a book. It's called Think Outside the Box. You'll hear me often talking about think outside the box, really push those boundaries. And tonight with the 5E model, we will be pushing those boundaries as we think about the inquiry-based model of just getting kids curious. Remember, our inquiring minds want to know was what was that first job, and what did you learn about yourself, and what did you learn about others and the world around you, and how did that help you? And tonight we're really going to think about how did that help us thrive. All right, today's agenda, we're going to be talking a little bit about the Portrait of a Nevada Learner. And again, we're going to be talking about thriving and how to make ourselves get through really difficult times where we have to think about thinking and we have to unlearn and relearn and just be patient with ourselves and others around us. And then we'll talk a little bit about student-centered learning, definitely get into the 5E model of instruction and how we can bring in tools and strategies to do that. And those of you that would like to take this 5E model and put it into action in your classroom, we have the extended Canvas course. You're all enrolled into it. So go ahead and flip through it like a magazine, or, go ahead and implement it in your classroom and get those 5 additional credit hours. So let's start off with, what is your favorite E word? What's your favorite E word? So again, it doesn't have to be anything about, the 5 E's or any now, but what's some of your favorite E words? Elephant, I like that. Eggplant, eating, those are some good ones. Empower, like that. Engage, explain. Okay, good. Some of those are like the 5E model words that we've seen. Good, good. I like it. Thank you so much for sharing. So tonight, we're going to talk about the Portrait of a Nevada Learner. And as we said at the beginning, when we talked about, that first job and how did that look like and how did we live through it, thrive through it. It was about a year ago. It was May of 2023 when the Portrait of a Nevada Learner was released, and it is across the state. So at that point in time, we said, look, this is what we want all learners, doesn't matter where they are in the state of Nevada, to have. And what that Portrait of a Nevada Learner says, look, we've got standards in math, science, social studies, and English, but what we want to do is we don't want only just kids to know those things. We want them to come out with skills that will help them thrive in their first jobs. And as I remember, if you go back into our chat today, when you guys said some of you started your first jobs when you were 13 and you started, babysitting, or you had a paper route, or you worked in your grandma's store. So they're starting those basic skills, life skills early. So we need to help students with resilience and communication and emotional intelligence and time management. And so what we're thinking about is, how do we blend academics and skills using pedagogy in our classroom? And that's what these series are all about. It's about changing the pedagogy in the classroom, still teaching math, still teaching science, but bringing in these other skills that allow kids to investigate and explore and take ownership of their learning, because that's what the Portrait of a Nevada Learner is about. It has 4 parts: empower, connect, impact, and thrive. And it goes back to these questions about, how will I make an impact in the world? How can I build and sustain relationships in the world? How do I grow my learning? How will I thrive in today's world? And so again, going back to our opening question, in that, how did you make it through, that first job, through college, through adulthood, to where you are today, right? So there was some type of empowering, and I'll go ahead and throw this up into chat here. The PDF for empowering, connecting, impacting, and thriving. So we're really trying to think about, how do we help kids reflect, be curious, be self-aware, have balance, collaborate, communicate, have purpose, feel that they have purposeful impact, and civic engagement, like small groups. Tonight, we're going to really focus in on that thriving, on helping them being resilient, because that first job that you had was hard to get through, and being courageous, right? Dealing with the public Like sometimes we talked about having people coming up and saying things that we didn't like, but we had to just, deal with it and figure out how to get around it, and having integrity and being intellectually agilic, right? Those are the things that go with thriving. So we have to think about being courageous. We have to think about how can we help kids learn from their mistakes, not tell them that they failed, or just tell them that failing is just your first attempt at learning, right? When you think about failing, all I did was I learned something. I learned that that's not the route to take. So thinking through and helping kids learn from their mistakes and having that intellectual agility about learning and unlearning. I've heard that if you memorize something for 7 times and you've repeated it over 7 times, it's really hard to unlearn it. So if you learn that 12 times 12 is 112 and you practice that 7 times, it's really hard to unlearn it and say 12 times 12 is 112. 12 times 12 is 112. You say it 7 times. The next time you come along, it's really hard for you to say, wait, 12 times 12 isn't 112. 12 times 12 is 144. So I have to relearn it. And it's hard to help with that intellectual agility, as well as being a person of integrity. And that's where small groups become really important, having kids working together and staying true to their values and their beliefs, and understanding that people solve problems in different ways. So tonight, when we do the 5E model, you're going to see that part of it is really getting kids to work together so that they can share their beliefs, share their values, share the questions that they're thinking about how they problem solve, and what's some brainstorming that goes on. All right, so let's go ahead and check it out. In our breakout rooms, what I want you to do is I want you to think about what is thriving. What kind of strategies are you using in your classroom when it comes to thriving? What strategies come to mind? Welcome back. Welcome back. Hey, if you got some really cool strategies that you're using in your classroom, please throw those up into chat. And so think about that thriving. What do you do? Oh, I see some there where you have some kids do some brainstorming. You have some kids at the board working out problems. Awesome. I like it. Yeah, because, it's like thinking about what does it help them to relearn and unlearn, having students being resilient and courageous about learning. So yes, having problems at the board is one thing to be courageous, because everybody sees your work, right? All right, so let's talk about student-centered, because that's what the 5E model is. It's really saying, let's do some inquiry, curiosity-based learning, and put it in the student at the center of the learning. And when we're doing that, we want to use still that 1/3, 1/3 balance of blended learning. So as you've heard me say before, personalized blended learning is taking the wisdom of the teachers, because you guys, your heart's so big and caring. You have so much smarts, not only in your academics, but how to work with kids. And you know your kids better than anybody. You add that in with the adaptability of technology that can help us deliver DOK level 1 and 2, or you can use the tools where kids are crafting things, where they're showing their learning and their mastery of things, so that we can create personalized learning space for students. So again, those 3 images, the teacher, the technology, and the students, become our thirds. So we have 1/3 technology, where we release 1/3 of the time DOK level 1 and 2 to the technology to deliver in videos, or CK12 or iReady, where they're delivering DOK level 1 and 2. And that other third on the other side there is where students are working together. They're crafting things. It could be a poster, it could be an audio file, it could be an Adobe, any of that, using technology to craft things. Think of that. 2/3 of the time, you're teaching by walking around. That 1/3 in the middle with you and your caring heart, that's where you could be having direct instruction. You can do small groups, you can do one-on-one, you could be setting up your playlist or your choice boards, but 2/3 of the time, you're teaching by walking around. And the 5E model really breaks that down and gives us an opportunity to do those 2/3 of time of walking around. So when we're thinking of the 5E model, what we're really thinking about is getting the kids to the bottom of this pyramid, right? The bottom of this pyramid from Edgar Dale, that was created in 1969. We want kids to remember what they've done 2 weeks later, 2 years later, not the see and forget, hear and remember, but we want them to do it, and we want them to understand it. We want them to own it. So 50% of the time of what they see and hear, like watching a movie, seeing it done on a location, watching a demonstration, they're more likely 50% of the time in 2 weeks to remember that, right? But if they can say it, if they're using the academic vocabulary, if they're explaining their thinking, if they're really going through a discussion and talking with their small group peers, they're going to remember 70% of it. But wait, if they can say it and do it, where they're doing a demonstration or a simulation, and the 5E model is that bottom green, man, it's where the kids really get to own the learning because they're doing the real thing. They're doing the learning. And that's what the 5E model does. It says, let's get the kids at the bottom of this very active pyramid, and not the passive reading and hearing words and seeing words, but really in that engagement of doing things. So here's the 5E model. The 5E model is inquiry based. It's totally constructivism. It's an approach where the learners are constructing their own learning rather than just sitting back and saying, hey, fill me up. Just tell me what I need to know so I can regurgitate it back to you. That's not going to work in today's world. We're in a world with, artificial intelligence where we can Google most anything. Don't fill me up and push it back out. That technology can do that for you. That's low level stuff. What we really need to get the kids to do is highly engaging. And you see the 5E model here. And here's the 5 E's, not elephant or eating like we saw in the chat, but it's engage. Get the kids hooked in, explore, have them really investigate, explain, formalize that language, and elaborate or extend it to higher order thinking skills. And as we're going through this cycle, let's evaluate, reflect on our thinking, reflect on how our small groups are going, reflect on formalized language, reflect on how it's used in the real world. That's the evaluative part. So it's very secular constructivist inquiry-based approach to learning. So what we're doing is taking ourself off the stage. It's not teacher-centered. It is student-centered. It's where the students are constructing their knowledge. They're actively engaged in taking ownership of their learning. We're going to pose some questions, and they're just going to dig deep into it. We get to step off the stage, just like those 2/3 of the time, and do some teaching by walking around as we're facilitating, and we're the learning partner. We're probing questions. We're asking kids to go deeper. They might pose a question, and we're like, have you thought about this? We're not directing, but we're guiding the learning, right? We're allowing kids to pose questions and learn from their errors. And hopefully there's that continuous assessment where they're assessing themselves, they're assessing their peers, and there's that ongoing feedback, because as we're teaching by walking around, we can say, hey, what'd you learn from this? Oh, have you tried this? So there's that constant going on, instead of saying, oh, let's wait till the unit and do a test and see how much you learn. No. We don't want to wait to the end of the unit. We want to have this ongoing evaluation, right? Where kids are collaborative and supporting each other rather than being competitive and saying, who got the top score? You got the bottom. We don't want that. We really want that student-centered, collaborative, supportive construction by students where they're actively engaged in taking ownership of their own learning. So we're taking ourselves off the stage like that 2/3 and doing some teaching by walking around. Now, I know that this is really hard for our students sometimes. Sometimes they have been sitting in classrooms where they're just like, fill me up and I'll just do what you need to do. So this is a mind shift on our students, because now they're active engagements. Now they're making decisions. We're guiding and helping them to make the right decision, and we're giving them opportunities to practice these types of things so that they have that growth mindset and they're collaboratively orientated, so that their small groups are helping them see different points of views and understanding that the world is more than what they see, but there's lots of different avenues that we can go in our learning. So again, it's a shift in that mindset, getting away from just passive consumers and receiving information and compliance. We're tired of compliance. Let's get the kids actively engaged. And that's where the 5E model comes in, right? The 5Es: engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. Now, you could do it as a playlist in those 5E format, but we'd rather have more of a secular type of coming through. What does that look like as we're coming through? And you're going to see that in just a moment. So let's talk about the 5E model. Before we do that, though, just want to throw this out there. Let's do a background check. Give me a 1 if you've created and used the 5E model in your classroom. Give me a 2 if you've heard about the 5E model, but you haven't created any yet. Or give me a 3 if you don't know what the 5E model is and this is brand new to you. Seeing a lot of 2s and 3s. Okay, great. So hopefully we're going to move those 3s to 2s, and we're going to get those 2s up to 1s. Awesome. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you sharing. So let's talk about the 5E model. The 5E model came in the late 80s. So these elementary science teachers got together and they said, look, we've got to figure out a way to help teachers learn science, help them have some good pedagogy in science. And science should be inquiry. It should be all based on curiosity. It's really, science is fun if you think about it. So we want to build on that curiosity. We want to take the students and let them get deep into it, and take that teacher and let them be the guide or the facilitator of the learning as the students are learning new concepts. And as they were doing this in the late 80s and the early 90s, they said, look, we've got to make it really easy for teachers to remember. So let's use a letter for all the words, make it really, really easy so that they can remember what the model is for science. And so they used E's: engage, explore, explain, elaborate, which I like to use extend and evaluate. Now, at that point in time, I know this was for science, but guess what, guys? It's not for science anymore. This can be done in any content area: math, science, social studies, English, music, art, any of our elective classes, thinking through what these stages would look like. Now, Roger Beebe is the guy who got these elementary science teachers together in Colorado in the late 80s. And he said, look, this 5E model is about active learning. It's about students asking questions, observing, modeling, analyzing, explaining, drawing conclusions, arguing from evidence, really talking about their understanding, where students are working collaboratively with their peers to construct. Right? Again, I said inquiry, constructivism, to construct and solve problems and plan and carry out investigations. So that's where the 5E model came from. It said, look, let's start off, and you can see here, even in this one, it's a spiral. Let's start off by hooking the kids. And hooking the kids means engage. It's like, let's generate some prior knowledge, find out what they already know about something, and let's just hook them into learning. We're going to trick them right into learning. What do you know about spiders? I don't know. Let's see. They're poisonous. Oh, they're going to bite me. I'm scared of spiders, right? So we're just engaging the students into that learning. Then step 2 is get them to explore. Let's put some ideas that we have out there and let's investigate it. Let's go out and explore what we know about it. Now, this can be a guided inquiry. It could be using a playlist and saying, I want you to go to these 3 websites, find out what you know, or it can be really open-ended, depending on how you want that exploration to be. But this is not a time for lecturing. This is a time for kids to work in small groups. Notice the little puzzle piece there, working in small groups with each other and coming together. Now, we could use an Edge protocol on that. We can use a playlist, like we said a moment ago, or a choice board where they're just exploring and they're building out their ideas. Now, what we want to do is we want to take those ideas and we want to formalize them. And that's where explain comes in. This is the 3rd step in the process. And this is where we actually, as educators, get to step up and start explaining some of the vocabularies and formalizing the ideas that they have, maybe putting what they've learned and formalizing, saying, oh, look, 3 groups found this out. This must be something that, we should know. And then, formalizing that concepts and the procedures and really making a formal presentation on what those concepts look like. And then after we formalized it, let's elaborate it. Let's extend it. That's the word I like. Let's extend it and go into some real world applications and apply this new knowledge into new situations. And then the final E is evaluate. And you can see the E's in the middle, but it's really a spiral. We're evaluating all along. We might have evaluated when they did their brainstorming and we said, look, we've got all these ideas. Let's investigate these 3 because, they were the ones that came up most often. Or even after they've done the exploring, let's have them as self-evaluate. What did you learn today? What did how did your peers work together? Even have them evaluate at the end of explain. You could have them evaluate at the end of extend. What did we learn today? How do we take this further? How do we take it deeper? All right, well, let's take this deeper. So number one, this is the deeper part, engage. Now, when we think of the 5E model, this first step, engage, is where we tune in. This is where we spark curiosity. And that can be done in a variety of ways. We can do a demonstration. You've seen people catch things on fire in science. You might read a book in literacy. You might have a brainstorming. You might do quiz trade, some questioning or some viewing of a video and say, how did that happen? Or a free write or a KWL. This is where we activate students' curiosity. This is where we're priming the students for learning new concepts, right? We're trying to determine what they already know and think about the possible misconception they have or where we can take them deeper. So this is that hook. We're hooking the students in. What do you know already? What do we want to know? So, right, that's that KWL. So what does it look like for the teacher? Well, we're generating interest, we're generating curiosity, we're posing questions, we're trying to elicit a response. We're not lecturing. This is definitely not a time to lecture. This is where we're just trying to hook those students in. Just tell me what you know and just accepting it, right? And we're eliciting those responses that uncover what students already know and think about a concept. And then the students are asking themselves questions. Well, what would happen if we did this? What do I already know? How can we find out more about this? So they're starting to really think, hi, I want to learn this. That's what engages. It's where we tune the students in to learning. So think through, how do you hook students into learning? It's lots of different ways of doing that. So like let's pick on, we did spiders a moment ago. Let's say perimeter. Perimeter is a great one. In mathematics class, I would tell the kids, hey, you know what? It looks like all this railing at the bottom is just falling off in the classroom. If we had to get some more of that baseboard, how much of baseboard do we need? And instead of saying this is perimeter, or instead of saying here's the formula how to find it, I give them yardsticks. I give them, tape measures, and we go and we find the perimeter of the room. We've got to put some brick around this student garden area. How much do we need to go around here? And then they'll do some measuring, right? We're not giving them the formula, but we're posing those questions for them to get hooked in to why they would want to learn, right? So now Step two is exploring and finding out. This is the part where we want them to perform the investigation. This is where we can actually bring in and we can set it up so it's more guided, where we give them some authentic resources to read, and we could jigsaw that, right? Have them solve some problems, have them construct some models like we just talked about with the pyramid, right? This is where where we want the kids to get active in questioning and designing and constructing investigations or research. And we want the kids working together. We want them problem solving together. Sometimes they're going to have to unlearn something that they learned before, like all spiders are poisonous. This is a great time to find out that not all spiders are poisonous. Some of them are really good for the environment, right? So this is that opportunity where we again step off the stage and we have our students find out, work together, and explore concepts. So what are we doing? Well, we're teaching by walking around. We're encouraging students to work together. We're observing and listening to our students. We might be asking probing questions to help guide that students or those groups to get where we want, redirecting when there's necessary, and providing time for students to puzzle through problems, right? So this is the opportunity where students they're really thinking, freely and actively, and they're exploring and they're researching and testing hypotheses. They're examining alternatives. You want them recording their learnings, right? You want them to know what's going on there, and you want to suspend judgment. They want to suspend judgment not only on our students, but also on each other. You don't want them saying, oh, Johnny, that's a really stupid way to think, right? We want them, again, going back to the portrait of an Nevada learner, we want them to be able to engage with others and connect and communicate and build the skills of cooperative learning, collaboration, communication, leadership, right? This is that opportunity for them to find out more, but also practice those P&L skills. So step 3, now this is where we get to step in. This is where we're now going to say, hey, we got to formalize this. This is where we take what they've been doing, right? And we want to formalize it and make meaning out of what they've been doing. So we take a little bit from each group and saying, what did you learn? What do we know? And we're really formalizing the learning. We're trying to clearly articulate what students learned and understood. So some ways of doing this is you can use a protocol called FAIR or gallery walks. Teachers can come in and explain. We can do even structured questioning, like in World Cafe, where the kids are comparing, classifying, analyzing. This is a great opportunity for us to formalize the language too. So I can now bring in the term perimeter and talk about where perimeter is used in the world and how we might find a perimeter of a square, of a rectangle, even a circle, though it has a different word. It's called circumference, right? But we're formalizing the language, and this is where we get to come in as instructors and share and formalize their learning, right? Making sure that they're on the right track on where they need to go. This is where we make sure we're hitting the standard that we want the kids to learn in science, math, social studies, and English, that they're hitting that standard. Now, keep in mind, this standard might be at low level because they've done some investigation stuff. Now we want to take them to the higher level. So when we do that, after we've done some explaining and we've sorted it out, again, the teacher action is helping to justify, formalizing the definitions and concepts. Students over here are listening. This is a listening where they might be questioning other people's explanations. They're listening to explanations that the teachers have to offer. They're recording. This is a great time for note taking, recording their new learning and their observations and their ideas and their explanations, and they're taking that down. So now that we've formalized the learning, After we've sorted it out and we've explained it, now we got to take it to a higher order. We can't just leave it there. Where does this happen in the real world? Where is perimeter used in the real world? Where are poisonous spiders we have to be careful about? And where are there really good spiders that we like having around our homes? So thinking through some of those ideas, we've got to take it to that elaborate. We're going to take it to what I like to call is extend. We're going to take the kids further. We're going to take them into deeper, more challenging and extending their learning and understanding and broaden that concept into real world applications. So this might be a great time for extended decision making, problem solving, more experimental inquiry, but at the higher level of investigating where is perimeter and spiders good, right? Making connections into the real world, thinking and classifying and comparing. So we're just getting them to that extended learning so that they can go on and get it to that higher order. Because remember that pyramid we talked about at that bottom, if they see and do and act on it, that's when they own it. So this is where we want them to really, really take that learning that we have formalized and put it into a higher order synthesis, analysis, the top of the Bloom's taxonomy. All right. What does this look like for them when they do it? We're again going to step off the stage and we're going to basically ask questions. What do we already know? What do we already think? We're going to encourage students to apply this new learning into into new areas, let them do some investigations where they're expected to use the new formal language, to use the new formal definitions. If we have a formula or a theorem from mathematics, we can do that. Again, students are applying these new formulas, these new definitions, new skills into similar but higher order areas where they're posing questions, they're proposing solutions, and they're making decisions and recording these new learnings in the real world, right? They're checking for understanding among their peers. So they're going further and deeper into their investigation, but after we have formalized the learning. Now, step 5, again, you've heard me say this before, elaborate is not something we wait till the end. That evaluation, that assessing, that reflecting, checking the student's understanding should go along all of them. I think about it all the time as I can have any point in time I can ask the kids, posing questions. I can use a Google form and I can say, tell me what you know today. What did you learn today? Or I can say, tell me how your team worked today. If you had to give everybody a grade, what would that look like? We want them to reflect and assess on their own learning, right? We can use single point rubrics. We can use performance assessments. We can have them produce products. We can have them write journals at any time. And we could even use protocols like Iron Chef from the Edge protocols, or creating a portfolio so that this should be ongoing diagnostic process of the learning. Again, it's not at the end, but it could be. Yeah, there might be this culminating experience like we did with our PBLs, but what we really want to do is have this going on and on. Not only us assessing the students so that we can do what's going to come next, but also we want them assessing each other. So what does this look like for us? We're posing open-ended questions. We're allowing students to assess their own learning, and we also want them to assess their group process skills. We want to observe the students as they're applying this new knowledge, especially in that elaborate or extend stage, and we want to just push them those higher orders where they're really opening up and doing some of those open-ended questions and demonstrating their knowledge and the skills and concepts and helping them collaborate around their groups and asking questions that helps them encourage future investigations. Right? And having them evaluate not only themselves, but also their group work and their peers, which again goes back to the Portrait of a Nevada Learner, where we're evaluating how did we communicate? How did we connect? What were my leadership skills? We can do small rubrics like that at any given time so that they're assessing as well, not only their understanding, but their skills that we want them in the Portrait of a Nevada Learner. So in the Canvas course, I've given you a document that really lays out the 5 E's, lots of really good stuff in the Canvas course, but I also gave you an example, and there's a couple of examples in there, but you can see this one here. They use the 5 E's, and it looks just like a playlist, and you could do it like a playlist where you're engaging, exploring, explaining, elaborate, and evaluate. It could be a playlist where the kids are going through all 5 stages. Again, it doesn't have to be. If it's a single day lesson, it might look like a playlist, but I like to think of it, this should kind of go over multiple times like in a unit of study. But the key points here, the key points is that each phase is building upon itself. So we don't want to omit any phases. Now I can repeat like we did the evaluation. I might want to repeat, or I might want to hook kids in because maybe they're, we want to get some more curiosity. I might want to repeat some stages and loop them back in, but I really want to build on that personalized learning. I really want to build on using the sequence of this in lessons over time. And what does that look like when I mean over time? Like it might be for a unit of study and what that looks like. So here's one where we're doing multiple days of multiple activities. Imagine for a moment, this is a cycle of events over 5 days. Let's call it Monday through Friday. So we have a concept that we want the kids in. So we're going to hook them in and spark their curiosity on Monday. And then we're going to let them explore. And at the end of that exploring, I want to do an evaluate. I want to just see, what did they learn today? So it's just a quick journal write. Then on Tuesday, again, I want to hook them in. So the hook is, what did you learn yesterday? And we start doing some, sharing what their conjectures they came up with. It's like, oh, cool. Now, did you guys all find that? Why don't you, go out and explore and revise your ideas? Because look, some of these ideas that are popping up here, or, can you help me validate those? And so the kids go into another explore stage. And at the end of that day, I might have a formalized, exit ticket where the kids I'm checking on their progress, where I might be saying, how are you doing this? What are some of the things that you're learning? And having them do some checking on their progress, or maybe even their group work at that point in time, having them do a little small evaluation. Wednesday, they come in and we're like, okay, let's see what we got going on, right? Let's hook everybody in. What are some of the big ideas? Let's put those up on the board and really get the kids engaged and hooked in. And then we'll go into the explain process. This is where we start going in and we're formalizing in that direct instruction. What are the key vocabulary? What are the key concepts? What are the key skills that need to happen? And this is after 2 days of exploring, or 2 mini lessons of exploring. And at the end of that, I want to do an evaluating to see how they understand. And it might just be on the vocabulary, or it might be on the skill concepts, right? So then I can have that'll help me on Thursday, the 4th day here, to say, okay, maybe we need to take this a little bit further. How do we take this further? What does it look like in the real world? Now we're hooking the kids in, right? And that's when we get them into the elaborate. That's where we get to extend. Again, that's my favorite word. I know they call it elaborate, but I like extend. We can extend it into deeper and broader, real world, more activities where the kids are taking that formal explanation and direct instruction that we did the day before into a deeper, broader area. And then at the end here, notice I didn't do an evaluation at the end of that day. I might just have them go right into group work and just have that group work where they're doing, where is this in the real world? Where do we find black spiders? Where do we find black widows? Where are tarantulas found? Where is perimeter use in the real world? So we're having them engage again in that group work. On day 5, or in this case, let's assume it was Friday, again, engage. What have we learned? So throwing that out, trying to hook them in, have them do a quick write there, having them think through what does it look like. And then I might do a formal evaluation. I might do a summative evaluation at this time. I might have them do a self-evaluation before I do the formalized evaluation. I would have them evaluate their teamwork. How did their skills pop up? Were they good with communication? Did Peter, in your group, did he help out? Did Susie do the part that she said that she was going to do? What type of mastery? Now, this is where you might have a formalized, summative type evaluation. It might be a portfolio, it might be a product, it might be an assessment. So thinking through, what does that look like? So again, notice how I didn't skip any stages. This is 5 days of a unit of study. None of the stages were skipped, but you can see how they cycled. They cycled through so that we can personalize that learning and get the students actively engaged in their group work. All right, so think about, how would you use digital resources, okay? Think about those 5 stages that we just talked about, and you saw how I did it over a 5-day period. How would we use digital resources to help pose questions, have students self-assess, and construct new knowledge? Welcome back. Welcome back. Hopefully you guys came up with some good digital resources. I stepped into a couple of rooms. We actually talked in there about exit tickets. We talked about how to use like Jamboard for brainstorming. We even talked about AI as a way to hook students in. So we had some really good conversations in our breakout room. Hopefully you did too. And if you have something really cool that you want to talk about, a digital resource that you used in your classroom, please throw that up in chat. All right. So talking about tools and strategies, let's see what we can think about as we're moving forward and as you're designing lessons in your classroom to get those 5 E's into your classrooms. So first thing we want to do is backwards design. Okay, we don't want to just say, oh, these are the activities. Well, the learning events, those activities are one of the last things that we want to look at. We want to look about what's the standard, what's the big idea, what's the concept that we want to have the kids learn. Once we know what concept it is, and earlier you heard me say perimeter, well, what if this time it was volume? What's that big idea? And what are some of the culminating assessments that I want to have the students be able to have at the end? So thinking about, well, are they going to create cones and volumes and tell me how they're different sizes? Is this 1/3 larger than that one? And thinking through what that volume looks like. So what's the culminating assessment? And then I can start thinking about, okay, how do I hook the kids in? How do I engage them? What type of explorations do I want to do? Do I want to bring in cereal boxes and lots of oatmeal cylinders and have the kids do some investigations, right? How are we going to formalize that or explain, right? We talked about that third steps where we come in and we formalize everything. Now, how do we take volume further? Well, how much water's in the pool in your backyard? How would we figure that out, right? Taking it to a higher order. And then, of course, making sure there's evaluation along the way. Not at the end. We could have that culminating assessment where we talked about maybe a portfolio of different places where volume is used in different places of the world and why we need to use volume and when do we use volume. And you know how those dang commercial cereal boxes have gotten smaller, 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 smaller in their volume and why for costs to go up, 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 up. Or try to stay the same, but we just get less. So thinking about backward design on what that looks like on your 5 E's. So again, much like the PBL, the project-based learning that we just finished earlier in March, it's still inquiry, it's still curiosity, it's that same 5 steps. We want to pose some open-ended questions. We want the kids to do some research and do some discovery. Notice those again. You've got that number 1 there, open-ended question. That's hooking the kid in, right? Number 2, having them research. Well, that's having them do that exploration. Number 3 right there, sharing what they learned. That's our E, our explain, where we formalize language, formalize the vocabulary. And number 4, we want to take them to the extended new real world situations. And then number 5, and this is so important, and I don't want it to be at the bottom. I want it to happen everywhere, right? That E, that evaluation. I want them to reflect on their learning and the process of learning, not only the knowledge that they gained, but the process they went through to get that knowledge along the way. So when you think of those basic steps of inquiry, even though I've got it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here, guess what they are? They're the 5 E's. Number 1, get the kids engaged. Number 2, let them explore. Number 3, let's share what we've learned and formalize it in an explained situation. Number 4, let's extend or elaborate this into real world. And number 5, evaluate, which is secular, and it should be in all those steps. All right, so inside the Canvas course, what you're going to find is you're going to go in there and you're going to see the digital tools and think about how you can do this. If we're going to have a brainstorming session, how do we want to do it? Do we want to do it on a Padlet? Do we want to do it on a Jamboard? Do we want to do it on a Fig Jam, which is the new one, right? How do we want to do that? Maybe it's on the whiteboard Phi. Think about what that looks like. How do we want to formalize the learning? When we talked about kids taking notes, where do we want them taking notes at? Do we want to have them on a collaborative Google Slides? Do we want them to take it in some type of form? What is that going to look like? So think of the different ways that we can do this. Like at Answer Garden. Oh, loved Answer Garden. We did that a while back where we just figure out what the kids already know. It's a great way to kind of get them hooked into learning, right? So that's there in the Canvas course. Think about different ways you can bring in digital content. The key concept here, inquiry base, curiosity, oftentimes needs to be done with others. So I can bounce ideas off of each other. So I can get new ideas so that I can view people's thinking and see how they're thinking about thinking and how they're proposing problems and how they're coming up with solutions and seeing all those different ways from different points of views. And so that I can help me grow in my reasoning and help me improve my problem solving skills. That's not going to be done in a solo situation because I might get frustrated. I might have learned helplessness. I might not, I need small groups. And so this is really important as you're designing your 5E process. process, make sure that there's that group exploration. If there's that group helping us empower our students to grow in their learning and in each other and building upon their skills in the Portrait of a Nevada Learner. So inside the Canvas course, I know you all know Caitlin Tucker. If you do, go ahead and put it in chat here. Yep, no Caitlin Tucker, right? She's done a couple books on blended learning. Now in our Canvas course, I believe it's on the Grow page. You're going to find some stuff there from Caitlin Tucker. What she did here is she created a playlist, and we talked about how you could do the 5 E's in a playlist: engage, explore, explain, elaborate, evaluate. You could do it in one lesson in a nice, easy playlist. What she has also done is she's created some small video clips for each of those stages. So if you're thinking, I can't remember what Kim said about elaborate, probably because I don't like the word elaborate. I like the word extend. So anyway, there's some videos there that you could do that. There's an example of a playlist that you can use to get that as well. So as you guys are going through this time, I want you to think about, you could do it over a unit of study, you could do it in a single lesson, but think about how you're going to get those 5 elements, the 5 E, and get our kids actively engaged in inquiry, curiosity-based learning. So your next steps are to think about the 5E model, right? Go into the Canvas course, learn a little bit more about the 5E model, and there's lots of really good stuff in there. Not only that, they will give you, just like I said here, like what are some protocols you can use, what are some activities you can use to help engage our students in different areas, right? The exploration doesn't have to be just, oh, go find out what you know. No, it should be guided. Keep that in mind. It's more of a guided, and it can be guided with a playlist, it can be guided with a protocol, it can be guided with a menu. And so think through what that's going to look like. So you want to reflect on the new pedagogies that you've learned over the 10 other courses prior today, and how are we going to put some instructional strategies together that empower our students, right, to help them go through this curiosity based. Now, you and I know that oftentimes the hard part, and we talked about mindset a moment ago, students will shut down, especially if we give them that opportunity. But if they're in a small group and we're teaching by walking around, we can guide that to get everybody engaged. So designing and deploying a lesson that supports the P&L, right? So we talked about tonight that thriving. Remember that first job that you had and how you throve, and you learned a lot about yourself, and you learned a lot about others, and you learned a lot about the world. Well, that's what we want our kids to do. We want them to engage in lessons where they're learning not only math, science, social studies, and English, but they're learning about themselves. They're learning about others. They're learning about the world around them. And that's what the 5E model is help them understand that they are a part of a community, to help them thrive in this world. And again, all this stuff is in the Canvas extended workshop. You're going to see lots of resources in there, including the Caitlin Tucker stuff that we just talked about, as well as that digital resource tool, what tools you want to bring in and have the kids investigate.